Hello there. Do you like Star Wars? I, for one, have a problem. Hello, my name is Conrad, and I'm going to present a pitch for a Star Wars story about a Top Gun Maverick Mobile Suit Gundam crossover set in the Star Wars universe. The title is Star Wars Heroes of War. You know, now that I say it out loud, the title probably needs some work. Oh, and our protagonists are gay. Just cause. Oh, for a brief aside, I don't know if you can tell, but I am reading this off a script, so that's why my eyes are glancing from monitor to monitor. And also, I do plan to turn this YouTube channel into sort of a creative vent, so if you like what you see, consider liking and subscribing. Basically, when I post on this channel, it'll be those projects where your brain is just like, hey, you should do this. And you're like, why? And your brain's like, Then there probably won't be an upload schedule. I'll just post when I feel like it. But hey, if you like some niche stuff like Metroidvanias, platformers, physics, Transformers, etc., and if you like content creators like Jello Apocalypse, Tierzu, and or Salmonella Academy, I have a feeling that you're gonna like my stuff. Alright, what was I talking about again? Oh yeah! Star Wars! So a while ago, me and my friend wrote this story out of a love of Star Wars and everything that makes Star Wars great. But what makes a good Star War? Is it Rey turning around, looking at the camera and saying, "My name is Rey Star Wars"? Is it "Use the Force, Luke"? Do I have to say, "Man, these stars sure are at war"? In all seriousness, I think Star Wars is great because any story can be a Star Wars story. These are just very relatable stories that happen to occur in the Star Wars universe. All of the stories that I really enjoy have a self-contained story that lives inside the Star Wars universe. It's no wonder that I love Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith so much. I do like The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, but I don't love them in the same way that I love Clone Wars, Revenge of the Sith, or Andor, for that matter. So the story me and my friend wrote, at least we hope, echoes that sentiment. And also, I became a fan of the franchise more recently, so that may also have something to do with my taste. But speaking of, last summer I binged all of the Clone Wars, and what stunned me was the variety of stories that were told and how cohesively they fit together. The Inhibitor Chip arc in Season 6 and the Fugitive Ahsoka arc in Season 5 were probably some of my favorites, and a few close seconds would be the Astromech Droid arc, and almost any arc that involves Mandalore. The reason why I think Clone Wars nails what it does is because it has a consistent theme. War and its consequences, and I dig it so much. What's amazing is that the broadness of the subject allows you to write stories that feel very distinct from each other while complementing the main theme. Now, this was obviously living in my head rent-free, and I just started coming up with ideas for Star Wars stuff in my downtime. I had a few ideas, like a Deathloop movie, but we look at different perspectives of people on Alderaan before the Death Star blows it up, or a zombie movie where some people crash land on a planet that's been taken over by some virus, etc., etc. However, the idea that I was really thinking about was a Star Wars crossover with Gundam. Gundam has many themes that pertain to war and its effects, as well as they talk about some of its causes, so I thought they would mesh together pretty well. Fast forward a bit in time, and me and my buddy were doing a late night gaming session, and we just started pitching ideas for Star Wars movies / TV shows. My friend really wanted to do a Top Gun Maverick story with an X-Wing pilot, and I told him my idea, and we put a Gundam in there, and we made the pilots a gay couple. We wrote a skeleton for a full TV show, and we did that for 4 hours. We are nerds. Anyway, it was like that for a while until the start of this semester. This is the start of the spring semester for my, oh god, 3rd year at UH? Have I been here that long? Well, I needed to take my required 3 credit hours for a creative arts elective, and I was looking around for something, and I found CLAS 3381, From Homer to Hollywood. The course description talked about ancient Greek themes in modern cinema, and I was like, that sounds awesome! And then I decided to take the class. I'll elaborate on the class itself in another section, but for now, know that I had the option to do a creative project. With the amount of stories we read, I thought, hey, why not breathe some life into that old Star Wars project with this newly acquired knowledge? I proposed the idea to my professor, and he was ecstatic. Turns out he's also a huge Star Wars nerd like me. And if you haven't put it together by now, this video is my submission. Oh, also, hi Professor! Leave a comment, it'll be funny. So what is the goal of this video? Well, I wanted to rewrite the Gundam Top Gun story to iron out some edges with the knowledge of the course I had in mind. Also, I wanted to keep the spirit of the original story intact in this rewrite. Also, while I did finish the writing of the story earlier, I'm writing, filming, and editing this video in one day because I want to study for my thermal physics exam on Wednesday, so as a result, the editing for this video is going to be pretty minimal. Maybe a picture here and there, but not much. So turn this video on in the background or something while you work on something else. Or just watch the video, whatever, I don't judge. Also, I have no freaking clue how YouTube's copyright system works, so I'm just gonna hope for the best that the video doesn't get claimed if I play Metroid, Nintendo, or some Sonic music when I talk about this. After all, it's that seems to be what the big YouTubers do anyway, so I'm just gonna do that and hope for the best. Also, I want to mention that I am not a professional writer. In fact, I am a physics major. I'm pretty outside of my area of expertise. The only real experience I have in writing is analyzing the media that I watch and like, and also DMing a little for D&D every now and then. So is that it for the preliminary stuff? I think that's it. Well, let's get started! So for the old right, we had it set in 0 BBY right before Rogue One with some overlap. And if you don't know what BBY means, it stands for Before Battle of Yavin, but for you non-Star Wars fans, just think of it as before the Death Star blows up. So we started with our characters and then wrote what we wanted to happen in the story around that. Our main theme for the story was the glorification of violence. The idea that your self-worth is determined by a body count is, quite frankly, dumb. And what truly makes a war hero is intent and sacrifice. Putting your well-being on the line for the sake of the well-being of others is what should be glorified. Originally, we wanted to put our middle names as placeholders for the characters' names, but I'm not going to use those names. I'm going to use their current names, and I will explain their etymology later. So, the Gundam pilot Ikakli Zamung Steel is heavily influenced by Mobile Suit Gundam Iron Blooded Orphans' Mikazuki August. IBO is the Gundam series that I know the best, and it was the first one that I watched. As for the others, I have watched Unicorn, which I thought was alright, Seed, which I hate, and I watched the first movie of the original, and I thought that was pretty good. However, IBO had all of the influence here because while the first season was a lot like most other Gundam series, the second season sees our protagonists become the villains and get brutally punished for it. But Season 2's execution is okay in my opinion because it's kind of an idiot plot, which I'm not a fan of. However, what I do like about Season 2 is that it explains what Gundam is and isn't from this perspective. There's a video that talks about that in amazing detail that I will link in the description, but the point is what makes Gundam so great is not the Gundams themselves, but rather the legacy of those machines. It is not the weapons, what the weapons are capable of, it is how they are used. And this is one of the core themes of the story that we are writing in general. Ikaklis is very similar to Mikazuki in the sense that he has grown up in this harsh environment and has known combat his entire life. The reason why he has known combat his entire life is because that said harsh environment is the galactic slave trade. And for those who've watched IBO, think of the human debris arc and you'll know exactly what I'm going for. Also, the galactic slave trade is not talked about all that much in the Star Wars universe in general, but for good reason. Slavery is a very touchy subject, and it's a very tough subject to talk about if you haven't done your research. However, the angle I'm tackling this from is similar to Anakin in the Zagiria arc of the Clone Wars, where we get to see how being a slave has affected Anakin on a very personal level. Also, with Palpatine not outlawing slavery, you would think Vader would have some choice words for Palpatine, but I don't recall seeing this, although I think they did it in one of the comics. I haven't read the comics, I just saw it floating around in my recommended ones. That said, I wanted Ika to have a knack for combat, but not enjoy it. Furthermore, his experience as a slave has made him very subservient by nature, and he does not like to make his own decisions or think for himself. He's more so like, I was told the only thing I'm good for is combat, so I must fight. In this sense, violence is his coping mechanism, and as the story goes on, and as he interacts with the cast, he learns how to live in a non-war setting, though he is more of a static character aside from developing a sense of autonomy. He is basically a moral compass / foil for the X-Wing pilot character, and he exists to call the X-Wing pilot out on his garbage and also develop his character. The X-Wing pilot, Mubabira Patropek, is a hotshot ace pilot who boosts his ego by how good he is in an X-Wing. Essentially, his character arc is the theme of the story. Over the course of the story, as he gets to know Ika, he starts evaluating his actions and why he does what he does. He joined the rebellion because of his friend, who is more of a plot device in this write and less of one in the rewrite. I haven't really named her yet, but she's what's called an enabler. She basically told Mubo to join the rebellion, and she nitpicks his minor flaws in order to prod his ego to get him to perform better. Also, Leia is there to act as a sort of moral compass / leader for Ika and Mubo for about 2/3 of the story. And Leia kind of fills this heart/smart guy role in the story. At the end of the story, Mubo Beer starts being more empathetic towards others, and he finds out that he can help in other ways than being in an X-Wing. He then realizes the theme of the story about heroic sacrifice and dies at the end to protect Ika from a killing blow. With all that in mind, let's tell the story. Our story starts in 0 BBY, above a planet where a fight breaks out between two Mecha Gundam robots and a fleet of X-Wings. One Gundam is piloted by Ika, and the other is piloted by his friend. We see the X-Wing piloted by Mubo take a shot at the two mecha. He loops back around to line up a shot. When Mubo lines up a shot on Ika, Ika's friend jumps in to block the shot and dies. Mubo comments to his astromech about what a clean shot that it was. Mubo is then called back to base on the planet of Crate. And after they start to retreat, Ika tries to pursue but is called back by his master. Mubo reports back to Princess Leia, currently on Crate, about the slave ships. Leia, who is currently trying to maintain her cover, urges Mubo not to go back because they don't actually know what the ship was carrying. Furthermore, she presses about the Gundams and comments that it could have been some ancient Old Republic weapon long forgotten and now refurbished. Leia also comments on Mubo's ego, stating that he doesn't have to prove anything and that he is a valuable human being regardless of his heroism. Mubo ignores Leia's orders and sneaks out anyway. We cut to Mubo flying his X-Wing in close to oddly no resistance. We find that Ika is being punished for his failure as his mecha is being repaired. He is now the last remaining soldier they have. Mubo kills the slave owner by shooting him in the back. He approaches Ika and asks if he is okay, overhearing that he is a slave. Ika confirms the idea, and when he is freed, he asks if there is somewhere for him to go, preferably somewhere where he can use his only skill of combat. Mubo makes a suggestion to join the rebellion. Because the parts of the Gundam piloted by Ika's friend were refurbished and slapped onto Ika's Gundam, Mubo does not recognize the machine and assumes it was at the hangar during their fight. Similarly, Ika does not think too much about the X-Wing because he was forced to fight, first of all, and second, he saw multiple X-Wings, so it could have been anyone in that fleet, not necessarily Mubo himself, that killed Ika's friend. Plus, Mubo is giving Ika somewhere to go. So Mubo brings Ika back to Leia, and she is cautiously optimistic about Ika. They give Mubo and Ika some tasks to do, specifically attacking Outer Rim slave outposts and also attacking major Imperial trade routes. In these scenes, Ika proves his competence to Leia and shows Mubo that there is someone out there that can keep up with them. Once those missions are said and done, Mubo and Ika are told to lay low for a while by order of Leia. Mubo takes Ika to a restaurant on some planet, and Ika is overwhelmed by the food, scenery, and music and enjoys every bit of it. He enjoys it to his fullest since he has never experienced things like this before. Ika here is unapologetically wowed, and Mubo finds that sense of honest joy very endearing, since he subconsciously builds his personality around his ego. After a while, they are called back to the field with another fleet, specifically the Enablers fleet. Let's call her Talia for now. Talia and Mubo rejoice that and are informed that Talia will assume the position of commanding officer under Leia for the time being. After a mission, Talia does her thing and nitpicks Mubo. Initially, Ika raises no concern, and after it happens a few times, Ika butts heads with Talia, saying that she doesn't know anything because she is not nearly as good as a pilot as Mubo is. Mubo defends Talia by saying that he needs the criticism, saying that, "If I'm not the best, then I'm worthless." Ika takes this to its logical conclusion, asking if Talia is better than him, and asks if she is worthless. He then asks, "What about me?" And Mubo doesn't answer because he knows Ika was degraded his entire life. And Ika storms off after saying, "Thought so." And they're quiet with each other for some time until they are attacked by a fleet of Imperial assassins who were tracking them for a while. In this instance, Ika and Mubo fumble their teamwork, and Mubo apologizes to Ika. He realizes that no matter how fast he flies, no matter how good he is, he will never be good as them together. He says, "Ika, I need you." And then they take care of the fleet and regroup with the rebel cruiser, carrying Leia, with the objective of escorting the cruiser to Naboo. Leia hopes to garner support from the Naboo people for the rebellion. After all, Naboo is a planet that has a thriving culture in the arts and sciences and emphasizes freedom of expression. Plus, they are somewhat chummy with Alderaan from what I've read on Wikipedia. On the way to Alderaan, Ika and Mubo still don't talk much, but they are fixing their relationship somewhat. And once they meet Leia, she notices something is off immediately. Leia tells them to not burn bridges and cherish people in their life lest they regret it. This combo can happen one-on-one or with both of them so long as the point is made for both of them. The conversation will go something along those lines. But what matters is that Leia shows that she cares for their emotional well-being. Considering how the Empire has been on their tail for a while, Leia is concerned that they have an easy time getting onto Naboo. While on Naboo, Leia goes to talk with some Naboo officials. Suddenly, Leia gets a call from Bail Organa telling her to go look for Obi-Wan Kenobi on Tatooine. Then, an Imperial blockade comes out of hyperspace in Naboo's atmosphere for suspected involvement in the rebellion. Given that they will search the planet, Leia doesn't want to get caught red-handed, so she asks for Ika to escort her command ship off-planet. Leia knows that there's no way that they can sneak out, so she opts for Talia's fleet to cause distraction on the planet's surface while Ika pushes through the blockade. Ika does so and docks with Leia's flagship after they push through and escape via hyperspace. Leia and her flagship land on the planet with the restaurant Ika went to, and Ika cannot shake the feeling that he has to go back. Through some method, he manages to approach Naboo's atmosphere. Cut to Naboo's atmosphere. Ika takes down as many Imperial ships as he can, fighting to get to Naboo. He gets shot down and crashes on Naboo. Talia's squad, along with Mubo, see him crashing into the atmosphere. Mubo rushes to the scene where he finds Ika unconscious but alive. He is relieved to see his friend and is overwhelmed with happiness, though he looks at the now exposed Gundam frame and feels a sense of eerie familiarity. We cut to a hangar on Naboo, where a rebel sympathizer is hiding. I was debating having the sympathizer being Pooja Nibiri. If that name sounds unfamiliar, I don't blame you. She's Padme's niece that was mentioned only in a deleted scene of Attack of the Clones, and apparently held the position of Naboo senator from 6 BBY to the point where the Imperial Senate was dissolved in 0 BBY. This was because Palpatine claimed that the rebellion invaded the Imperial Senate and was providing the rebels funds and information. I mean, he's not wrong, but that's very undemocratic of you, Palpatine, but again, par for the course. Let's call the rebel sympathizer Pooja for now. Ika wakes up to find Mubo, Talia, and Pooja waiting for him. Mubo goes in for a hug, but is stopped by a medical droid. Ika smiles and lets Mubo know that he is okay. Pooja asks about Leia and where she is, and Ika explains that she is off-planet and that he came alone. Pooja gives Ika the rundown of how the Imperial blockade is affecting the lives of the Naboo people. She says that the Empire has, quote-unquote, discovered a rebel presence and will only give the Naboo supplies through rations which take a while to reach Naboo and do not have much in the first place. The Empire doesn't have much of them in the first place. Trade of any kind is strictly forbidden and a curfew is in place. The Empire has fully occupied Naboo. The Empire is likely wanting to wipe out Ika, Mubu, and their squadron considering the damage they did, so they cannot use their machines as much as before. Pooja seeks to steal supplies from Imperial bases to prepare for a counterattack. So if they can't get their own supplies, they'll just use the Empire's supplies. However, stealth here is the key. On one stealth ops mission, Mubo has to look a stormtrooper in the eyes as he kills them. And so for here, I'm trying to avoid the, "Hey Jim, how's that family? I hope you're alive to see them again" kind of dialogue. Though this kind of gets really close, I just need to emphasize that these stormtroopers are in fact people, and that he is taking a person's life. At this moment, Mubo starts recalling the mark on the Gundam frame. He then thinks that he might have killed Inka's friend. He goes to his astromech R4 to check, and he has R4 play back the footage, and he sees the same symbol in Ika's Gundam video, on Ika's Gundam in the video before Ika's friend blocks the shot. He pauses the footage, and the realization sets in. He plays the footage again, followed by him bragging to R4 about how great of a shot that was. Mubo, who is disgusted by himself, starts losing sleep and starts asking philosophical questions like, what justifies a kill in the war? Ika notices the shift in Mubo's psyche and asks what's wrong. Mubo initially doesn't want to talk about it, but after enough pressure, he gives in. He tells Ika that he thinks he has killed his friend. Ika is initially in denial, but R4 shows him the video. Ika sits for a few moments in silence, and when Mubo tries to break the silence, Ika pushes him away. Ika shouts at him, confirming all of Mubo's anxiety, and storms off. No contact for what feels like weeks. Mubo realizes that he can't change the past, and while he's really hurt, he starts helping out the Naboo by cooking food, stealing supplies from the Empire, comforting the children, etc. It's important to note that he should not do this out of guilt, but rather that he realizes that these people need help. Here, he's finishing his character arc. Mubo does not expect forgiveness from Ika, and he has made peace with that. But he decides the person who he wants to be. Not his guilt, not Talia, not anybody else. Mubo meets a nice old lady who listens to his troubles about Ika, and when she brings Mubo meets a nice old lady who listens to his troubles about Ika when she brings it up. Mubo initially does not want to talk about it, but with enough pressure, he gives in. After learning the situation, the old lady talks to Ika and gives him an anecdote about her life that is analogous to the situation in some way. After some contemplation, Ika confronts Mubo. Mubo tells Ika not to do this now, and Ika pulls him away anyway. Ika tells Mubo that he forgives Mubo because he is not the same person as before and has grown into the person they loves. They share a kiss. With proper supplies for the counter-assault and news of the battle on Scarif, the rebels on Naboo hope to deal enough of a blow to the Empire's blockade that they will be forced to do a tactical retreat. In the time that the Empire is recovering, the rebels will leave Naboo. The hope is that the Empire's split attention and the desperation of the attack will convince the Empire to leave Naboo alone for a while. This will also give time for the current leader of Naboo to send a message to neighboring planets to petition for a negotiation on Coruscant. Before the final battle, Mubo and Ika have a talk. They say that fighting in this war is no longer appealing for either of them. They realize that they want to help in other ways that they can. They agree to finish this battle, and then leave the rebellion. Once the final battle begins, they put up a good fight. However, the Empire starts to put pressure and start to target Ika. In the ensuing chaos, Mubo sacrifices himself to block a lethal shot on Ika. Before he goes out, he tells Ika to finish this and live. In a rage, Ika destroys the surrounding fleet and succeeds. He then escapes with the rebel fleet. Oh, okay. Phew. We did that. How are y'all doing? You need some water, snacks, a break? Good. Not going anywhere. So get those snacks, get a break, because we are about to get into the rewrite. Just unpause when you're ready. Alright. Ready? Alright. Let's go. So before I get all negative, the old write does do a lot of things that I like. One in particular is Leia. I think using her smart/compassionate side of a character is showing more of her just being awesome, because I actually kind of really liked her portrayal in the Obi-Wan Kenobi. More so, just watching her being smart is really good. Also, she's in the perfect leader, as the surprise blockade demonstrates. Because I don't want to have like a super perfect character, but yeah, it's good. I think her portrayal was good. Also, Mubo's character arc is very satisfying and complete. He starts out as this arrogant person that learns to correct his behavior and become a better person. He becomes a person who is selfless and finds meaning in life beyond the rebellion. Also, I quite like the twist of him killing Ika's friend and reflecting on his past self to show character development. That said, this story has an abundance of problems. Why did the Empire almost shoot down Ika at the climax when Ika pushed through the blockade initially on 2 separate occasions? We know what makes Mubo love Ika, but what about the opposite? It seems in some cases, Ika has Stockholm Syndrome. Wouldn't it have been more noble for the rebels to surrender at the beginning of the Naboo arc to prevent the Naboo people from suffering? What does Ika see in Mubo to make him forgive him? Why didn't the rebels lay low until the Empire lost interest? We rant on the glorification of violence, and yet we have Ika do an anime rage moment at the very end. What gives? The reasoning for them leaving the rebellion at the end is also rather weak, and not much is done with Ika as a character. Also, the last stand seems kind of pointless and impossible. So here are our problems. We need to rewrite Ika so that he has an actual character arc, and we need to rewrite his dynamic with Mubo. And our theming is in a very rough spot because we need to be able to talk about the glorification of violence while also showing fight scenes between the rebels and the Empire. So how do we do that? How do we differentiate such violence, and how do we connect it to our theme? And we also need to give better reason to believe that the final assault on the Imperial blockade is in fact a good option. So with that said, let's get into the fixes. So with the following in mind, how do we improve our theme, and how does this course that I took play into it? Well, in that course, I learned about how masculinity and being a man has a lot of intersection with society and how stories are told. And they're also a gauge for what was okay for a man to do back then, as well as responses to what was happening in society at that time. Take, for example, Euripides' portrayal of Heracles. As a quick summary, this is a twist on the original 12 Labor story of Heracles, where Heracles, yet another literal bastard of Zeus's, is tricked into killing his wife and kids by Hera, which is Zeus's wife. As penance for Heracles, Heracles performs 12 labors of supernatural scope. Most of them boil down to Heracles doing some superhuman feat, beating up some monster, etc. Whatever. However, in Euripides' version, it's quite different. So, Heracles kills his family after he performs the 12 labors. And for most of the story in Euripides' Heracles, Heracles himself is off doing the 12 labors, and instead the focus is on his family when he's not there. His family is about to be killed by Lycus, which is a false usurper, and when Heracles does arrive, he does kill Lycus, but Heracles also kills his family in a rage that was caused by a literal deus ex machina by none other than Hera. I think this story is a very clear analogy for PTSD and soldiers reintegrating into life. Heracles is gone from home doing some noble task, while his family is wondering when he'll be back. When he does get back, it is his strength and, more importantly, his lack of control that kills his family. And also, this connection gets even stronger when you consider Euripides himself was born around the time of the Persian War. His masculinity, which the Greeks typically... Heracles' masculinity, which the Greeks typically loved, was completely flipped around as a bad thing. Aeneas from the Aeneid is also a good example of this. In the Aeneid, Aeneas himself is very duty-bound, but his inability to balance his duty with how he feels about the people around him caused the people he cares about to suffer. Case in point, Queen Dido. These stories take the manliness of their protagonists and say, what are the consequences of that? And it's in those consequences we find our theme. The scary part of war often is that it isn't treated as a means to an end, as it should be, but rather the cost of that means to an end is often overlooked. In fact, the Clone Wars makes this point very clear. The Umbara arc and Padme's speech in the Season 3 episode The Pursuit of Peace are excellent examples of this. Our theme is that no matter what in war, our actions have a cost, a human cost. Any action in war must be thought about by everybody, including the soldiers. They need to evaluate what they are fighting for and make a moral judgment, if they agree with it or not, and most importantly, they need to do it of their own free will. That is our theme. So, how do we show that, and how does that affect our rewrite? Well, I think the best way to do it is show, don't tell. In every fight, it needs to be shown why conflict is initiated, and our character's reaction to the violence determines their growth. It also needs to be shown that a person dies when somebody is shot down. Gundam does this in a pretty good way by showing the enemy cockpit before death. So, for example, how I would fix the Naboo arc is by having the protagonist lay low and see what happens. The Empire does not relent and the people begin to suffer. What happens if the rebels turn themselves in? That would show Naboo is hiding rebels, and given their relationship with Alderaan, they could suffer for it. What reason could there be to believe that? After the Clone Wars, Antar 4 and its people suffered from excessive punishment from the Empire due to Antar 4's previous separatist ties. Therefore, there is no reason to turn themselves in, and if they fight, they could at least turn the Empire's resources against them and hurt the blockade enough to get help for Naboo. This is the kind of consideration that needs to happen. What is the best for the people they are fighting for? As for soldier autonomy, that's where Ecocles' rewrite comes in. I rewrote him as a skilled soldier that follows orders at the start of the story. His background as a victim of slavery has made him afraid of failure and stepping outside of his comfort zone. He thinks this because he associates failure with death, so he has the idea that combat is the only thing that he is good for. He also does not like to think about his actions. When he is ordered to lay low with Mubo, he is hesitant to adopt the quote-unquote normal life and finds it very difficult. Mubo sticks up for Ika when he is having trouble blending in and comforts Ika out of respect for him, not as a warrior, but as a friend. Here, we give Ika a reason to like Mubo. I don't think this is out of character for Mubo to do, since he can still have egotistical traits, because, well, they are on a mission while undercover. Also, being thoughtless towards your enemies and caring about your friends are traits that can coexist. I mean, just look at Gon, Freaks, and Son Goku, for example. And as Ika learns of how to live outside of war, he begins to develop a distaste for violence, and it all culminates in the Naboo arc, where by looking at Mubo helping out, he realizes that only he can decide who he wants to be. Will adapting be scary? Oh, certainly. Without a doubt. But he would rather carve his own path than live in fear. That's why at the end, he leaves the rebellion. We will also have an epilogue that shows him dealing with Mubo's death. He won't completely get over it, and we will show the pain he feels, but we won't get to see him resolve his pain. The future is scary, but that's what makes his choice so important. Despite this pain and uncertainty, he pushes forward. So he starts out as someone who is scared, easily angered, and obedient, but grows to be tempered and brave through his autonomy and love for Mubo. As for Mububira, his writing remains mostly the same with a few minor tweaks. He craves social validation because he never got it, and that's why he brags about his skill all the time. It is due to the enabler that this became a problem, and as for talking to Ika, he tries to start talking to Ika by complimenting his skill as a warrior, but this does not get him far. It is only when Mubo helps Ika with his human troubles does he start to connect with them. So, etymology. Ikaklis, Zamang steel. Ika comes from Ikari, which is anger in Japanese, and also Ika is one letter short of Mika, which is the nickname of one of my favorite Gundam pilots, Mikazuki Yagas. Ika spelled backwards is Aki, which sounds like the start of Achilles, just pronounced different. Which makes sense as this character can be quick to anger. Cleese comes from Heracles, which is important as this character has themes of soldiers reintegrating into society as Euripides' version of Heracles. Also, Lys is the last symbol in Achilles. As a whole, Ikakles is a pseudo-portmanteau of Achilles and Heracles, which is kind of what this character is. Zamang steel pulls from Dutch words, gehoorzaam, meaning obedient, angst, meaning fear, and stil, meaning silent, which portrays his other character traits of obedience and fear. Also, since he is supposed to be the ideal soldier, his demeanor on the battlefield is roughly static for most of the story, so he's still. So, for those not in the know, Star Wars has deep Japanese and Dutch roots as well. In fact, Darth Vader's name in Dutch translates to Dark Father. So, or rather, if you take the name Darth Vader, that is Dutch for Dark Father. As for Mububira Patropek, Mububira pulls from Mubo, meaning reckless, and Misebira Kasu, meaning show off. And the last name admittedly needs some work. I wanted to incorporate the idea that he fears being alone or useless, but for now, Patropek pulls from Patroclus, the partner of Achilles, and Gesprek, meaning talk. And more suggestions on this name would be very helpful. So here's how we paint the Empire as evil. They assert their power by will of force and do not have consideration for the people or planets they endanger. Basically, think about it like, rebel scum type beat. They don't really consider the fact that the rebels are people, they just see them as rebels and want to destroy them. And also, considering that they hold Naboo hostage, is kind of a dick move. So, lastly, we want our characters' actions to have impact, whether that be positive or negative. So we show the effects of their action or inaction through the people they help or don't help, right? So, essentially, if the characters do X, what happens to the world around them? That way it feels like they're living in a world and not like you're being taken through an amusement park as things happen to characters. And one more thing, I wanted to make the enabler a foil to Leia. Leia is more considerate of how soldiers feel, while the enabler is more concerned with soldiers producing results because they are fighting for the right thing. If you asked Leia why the Rebel Alliance was good, she could give you examples of good things that are done. She would also ask their soldiers why they would feel such a way. If you asked the enabler, she would probably just reply because the Empire is bad and not elaborate. Maybe tell you to get back to work. As a consequence of her lack of compassion, we need to show her be a less effective commander than Leia. Then her character would be forced to change, but I'm not exactly sure how I would implement this. However, I do think it would be similar to the dynamic between Ultra Magnus and Optimus Prime and Transformers Prime. I also did have 2 more characters written. I had a Lancer and a recurring antagonist that was a Death Squad leader. So, and also for those not in the know, a Lancer is kind of like a Vegeta Sasuke type character. So for this Lancer, I had him be an ace newbie with a vengeance quest. I decided to lean into that edge, and I'm going to deconstruct it. So as he continues to do missions, those missions get him to question whether joining the rebellion was actually the right thing in the first place. And after they, quote-unquote, free his home planet from Imperial control, life on that planet actually kind of gets worse overall. Because this home planet has an association with the rebels, it's harder to get supplies into the planets, and his planet starves to death. So therefore, he joins the Empires and dies at the hands of the main cast. And the reason why I had this character in the first place is to kind of show the enabler's incompetence. Basically, I would have the enabler talk to the character once and not really show much concern for how he feels about it, right? He would sort of ask the enabler, it's like, am I doing the right thing? And you're like, yeah, obviously, go away. So that's not the proper way to deal with that. So his death obviously impacts the main cast very heavily, and he dies believing he's doing the right thing. And that's the tragic part. As for the recurring villain Death Squad leader, it's sort of, he or she, I'm leaning towards she, is a dark reflection of our protagonist, right? She embodies the idea that change is bad and looks at the rebels as if they're challenging her authority. Because one thing I did notice while I was taking this whole Greek masculinity class is that typically there's a lot of old man yells at cloud energy that is just like, oh, back in my day, this was better, blah, 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 right? So this sort of embodies that idea. It's just like, the Empire is better, shut up, I'm better, blah, 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 right? It's the sort of know your place kind of villain. She enjoys combat, and she's very boastful, and views anybody on her skill level as a threat. It's like, you think you're better than me? And basically, she has a murder boner for the main cast. And while they may be nice for talking about further themes and help better characterize our protagonists, I found trouble implementing them for practical reasons. Another difficult part of writing this was making sure it followed the rules of Star Wars canon. Like, how does a recurring villain have a fight with the heroes, lose, and come back if one shot to a TIE fighter can make it blow up? Right? Also, the whole pushing through the blockade thing, I decided on an armor system for the Gundam. It has pieces of light armor that break and expose the main chassis, which makes the Gundam slightly more tanky than the X-Wing. Admittedly, I don't have all the details of the naval combat worked out, but what I do have, I believe to be a great framework for excellence. And that's where you come in. I'm sure as this video floats around the corners of the internet, there's bound to be someone who's a better writer than I am. So for those of you who think I could have done better, please leave a comment and tell me why I suck. I did rush a bit to get this video out, so any criticism, editing, writing, or otherwise is very much appreciated. That said, I am at the end of a 6,000 plus word script, and I am very tired. So I'm going to end this video here, and if you want to stick around with my channel for other stuff that I may upload, please consider subscribing, and let me know what kind of content you want to see. Gaming, video essays, rants, fun facts, I have a lot of ideas, and your suggestions could help me narrow it down. That said, I am signing off, and I will hopefully see you guys again whenever. Bye-bye.